Hello and welcome to the video lecture for week 9. As you can see, it's a really short week. And think back to all the crap you had to do for all those other weeks. And this one is an introduction to Project 2. It's scaled down, and instead of a quiz and a little assignment where you write about stuff to overview, I've nixed the quiz, combined everything into understanding concepts. There's the assignment guidelines, so you kind of get more of a feel of, okay, Project 2 is this. And then you do have to write a sort of overview, but we'll get to all that. So we start with understanding concepts. I will try to keep this video short, but who knows, because there is quite a bit to cover in terms of what is Project 2 all about. Well, at the beginning of the year, the readings overviewed a little bit what it was, but you were mired in Project 1 and oh no, I have a group thing and what am I gonna do? But now you're on your own. You've written a paper by yourself. You know how to gather a bunch of sources quickly. And that is a great skill set to build upon for Project 2, which requires 6 sources instead of the 4 that you had to gather for your position paper. And even though a lot of the elements are going to look similar, yeah, you need an intro, conclusion. At the end of the intro, you need a thesis statement. You need to decide on an audience who is not me, because I don't care about your topic probably in the way that a stakeholder sort of audience would. You need in-text citations. You need an integrated image, but for there are some changes to these basic tenets of the assignment. And it starts with the integrated image that you're supposed to include. Instead of going to Pixabay or Wiki Commons or wherever to find your image, visualization that you create based on your primary research. The primary research can be a survey you have disseminated on, I don't know, SurveyMonkey, Google Forms. And then if you're like, I don't want to do a survey, and this is all forward thinking, you don't have to have the primary research ready to go. That's weeks down the line, but it is part of the assignment. You can take part in online observation. That means filming reviews or tweets. You take these text-based online observations of how people are feeling about the topic, and you can still create something like a word cloud, or there's other ways you can create a data visualization based on that kind of primary research. So just that alone is a big change. And then again, the number of sources, you're going from 4, and now you need 6. And instead of focused on trends in the research for Project 2. You don't need to assert, here's 1, 2, and 3 things that I'm going to talk to you about that are definitive, that I'm going to kind of argue for you. Instead, you're going to inform the reader of trends in the research sources, things you've noticed that you're highlighting for them, and you're saying, hey, this could mean this. You're being more open-ended in this paper. You're not arguing anything. And instead of just, I'm going to keep talking about it, but instead of just talking about it, I'm going to click on the outline. You click that basic outline. It's going to take you to this page. And I'm going to do that. And drag. So that you see how many paragraphs that you have to have for project 2. It can be 8 to 9 because paragraph 8 is optional, because if you don't want to have 9 paragraphs, you might decide I can do this part in the conclusion and briefly mention what I feel is implied by the sources overall. And that just means what kind of trends or gaps in the research that you just reviewed, what did you notice? That's in the conclusion or in this implication of sources paragraph. That's where you can put your thoughts without saying, I believe this is true, or I think. You can say based on the sources, those sorts of things. And in one of the paragraphs, it doesn't have to be paragraph 7, it can be 2, 3, 4, wherever. In one of the paragraphs, you do need to discuss your primary source and the data visual that you've created. So eventually we are going to discuss primary research methods. I am going to help set you up for that, creating a survey or conducting online observation, and then creating a data visualization from the information you gathered so that it becomes your sixth source for the paper. Okay. There is a word count that you need to, a word count range that you should hit. It should be about 4 to 6 pages of content. So that means the paper itself is 4 to 6 pages. If I lopped off your works cited page, I would still have 4 to 6 pages that you should turn into me. And you can still choose MLA, which is what we see from the student sample, or you like APA, then you can do APA formatting. But if you choose APA formatting, it's a more formal assignment. You need a cover page and an abstract page, and then your content, and then the reference page. But so we can overview the student sample here and get more of an idea, an exemplary idea of what we're doing. Headers are a must for the assignment. You don't have to have one for the introduction because that's obvious. But you're staging your sources or synthesizing your sources based on trends or based on moving from, specific to less specific sorts of sources, or there's just different ways you can stack your sources, your source paragraphs, your little sorts of overviews of the sources so that the audience is getting an idea of what is the problem in the topic or what problem are you highlighting, because several other researchers have looked at your same topic, but what have you noticed and how can you stage that throughout the paper? And again, instead of using more definitive language or arguing your way through it, you're going to be relying on what the researcher is saying to get any sort of point across. You won't be making any sort of point, but you can use the researcher to make a point for you. Or you could say, so-and-so might defend their argument, or this point made by so-and-so researcher seems to be. You can say those sorts of things, but you're gonna leave the argumentative side of yourself out of this assignment And if you have any thoughts on the future of the topic, or again, gaps in the research, you briefly, we see this conclusion is not very long, you briefly highlight it there. And this was an older student sample, so there's not the use of primary research and there's not the data visualization included. That's something newer that USF has decided you need to include in this assignment. And so student samples are never perfect, and it doesn't have that, but yours needs to have it. Okay, back to understanding concepts, which says a lot of what I just said, that instead of arguing, you need to avoid that sort of definitive language. And how are you going to stage your sources? It's not something you have to decide now, but you do have to start thinking about synthesis or the flow of your sources. For example, you might gather 5 article or text-based sources, but how are you going to, what is going to be the flow in this outline? Where is your Rodriguez source going to go, or where is your Smith source going to go? Because it's going to be one source per paragraph. So you might decide that 2 of your sources really have historical undertones. And then you might decide 2 of your sources are talking about modern techniques. And then one source is really, they're specifically talking about one person or one research study that happened that's exemplary of the topic and what's going on with it. And so those become your trends or how you're gonna stage your information. And we see here another example of what I'm talking about. Staging your sources. If we were to outline how to stage your sources, this would be it. And the bolded part is an example of the header, how you're going to separate each section. And then in paragraph 2, you'll talk about historical source, paragraph 3, historical source, and so on, so that you're building the flow of your paper and knowing that each paragraph, each main body paragraph, should only be talking about one source, but that does not mean your paper is a series of mini book reports and you're just yammering about the topic. Each paragraph should end with a sentence that leads to the next source, so that you have that organizational pattern. The staging seems like you planned it out and you thought it out, and that you're sewing together the sources overall, and you're highlighting that problem within the topic without saying I'm going to solve it or that it's definitive. When I'm talking about staging or flow of your sources, if your topic is like is maybe specific, I want to write about this topic, and the teacher's talking about staging my sources and getting like 3 headers together, but I don't know, I don't have the sources. What am I going to do? You can decide on your 3 kind of trends or how you're going to stage your information before you get the sources, and then look for sources that reflect that sort of trend or idea. But you'll already have an idea of how your paper is going to go. So if you decide on children's toys and Barbie dolls, and the problem is Barbie should change with the times. That's not our thesis statement, but it's kind of sort of. Your 3 trends might be so our topic is this. What sort of sources should I be concentrating on, or how could I stage my paper? You start to almost think in the idea of subtopics, but not really, because you're not trying to prove any claims, and you're building sections rather than subtopic paragraphs. But you are finding sources that have this sort of thing in common, so that you have a topic, but it's not that wide open throughout the paper because you focused it at least into 3 content areas, or as later in this slideshow that you should preview or download. This slideshow is helpful because it has other ideas for how you can stage your information. Once you do have your topic, you can go in topical order, and that's kind of the one I've been leaning on. I think it's an easy one to do. When you take sort of topics or issues related to a problem, and you decide how you can sort of lump your sources together that way. Or if it is a historical sort of topic and things are happening in chronological order, or you're finding that with your research, then that's how you can stage. And maybe instead, you would just decide on centuries or decades to really highlight. And that would be your flow of information. Or if there is a problem in your topic, but you want your sources to move from the background and then problems within it. May not work because the topic you're choosing is probably wide open and things are constantly kinetic and changing. So that might be how you stage your flow of sources, your synthesis, how you're sewing things together, and then there's some other ideas. I'm giving you examples of how this project is different and how you can tackle it in the future, because while outlines or thinking of how you're going to stage things, it's really boring and it can be hard. It makes things a lot easier for later on. And it actually, if you start every project that way, I feel it's a sign of you're becoming more mature, because you're realizing the things that are not so fun in a conventional sense, they're good for you and they make things easier. So why not do them? I'm trying to tell my kids that, but they're 5 and 10 and they don't care. So, all right. So we have a semi idea of what we're heading into. You're drafting a paper. You get to choose the topic this time, but don't worry too much about topic selection. We're gonna do that next week. And instead of arguing your way through a topic of your choosing, you're merely pointing out to an imagined audience, hey, I noticed these things about the topic, or these things are interesting about the topic, and let's discuss what the researchers are saying about it. And then if we go back here and we look at the project to overview, you just have to answer a couple questions about project 2 based on your understanding of the reading and of the slideshow and of the outline of the assignment. And then I do want you to list 3 possible topics, and they should be topics you can frame as a problem or an issue, and they should be related to your career or academic path, and you should be interested in these topics. And these are just possibilities to get your wheels turning. You don't have to, if you list them here, you don't have to then carry them into next week or the rest of the semester. You're not married to these topics. It's just generating ideas. And then if you have any questions for me, that's number 8. Otherwise, it's going to be blank. It's a text box, so I don't care about any formatting. It's due March 13th at 11:59 p.m. You have that 3-day leeway. The until is not the due date. That's the late extension date. The due date for me grading it with the possibility of the full 25 points is that date. So questions, you email or you WhatsApp me.